It's been said that a flower is the poetry of reproduction, an example of the eternal seductiveness of life. We look at flowers, we plant them, we grow them. In an inner silence, we immerse ourselves in their color, their shape, their smell, their texture, the way they emerge from the soil, the way they open, the way they move in the air. We wrap ourselves for an instant in their innocence, in their grace, in their sometimes savage beauty. We offer them to loved ones as symbols of our mutual innocence, our mutual grace, the beauty of our relationship. We put them on tables, we put them on vases, we offer them to sad or ailing friends, we paint pictures of them. Artists draw inspiration from flowers. Auguste Rodin considered that the artist was the confidant of nature. He believed flowers carried on dialogues with him through the graceful bending of their stems and the harmoniously tinted nuances of their blossoms. Every flower had a cordial word which nature directed towards him. Painters like Paul Cézanne and Marc Chagall looked at the perceptual composition of flowers. They said that in order to judge their art, they took their paintings and put them next to a God-made object, like a tree or a flower. If it clashed, it wasn't art. But the Welsh writer Dylan Thomas took us deeper, much deeper, in his poem, "The Force That Through the Green Fuse Drives the Flower." Thomas takes us to the organic network of life, to the unseen register in which the wind, the rocks, the flowers, our very blood, are connected. The force that, through the green fuse, drives the flower, drives my green age, that blasts the roots of trees, is my destroyer. And I am dumb to tell the crooked rose, my youth is bent by the same wintry fever. The force that drives the water through the rocks drives my red blood, that dries the mouthing streams, turns mine to wax. And I am dumb to mouth unto my veins how at the mountain spring the same mouth sucks. The hand that whirls the water in the pool stirs the quicksand, that ropes the blowing wind, hauls my shroud sail. And I am dumb to tell the hanging man how of my clay is made the hangman's lime. The lips of time leach to the fountainhead. Love drips and gathers, but the fallen blood shall calm her sores. And I am dumb to tell a weather's wind how time has ticked to heaven round the stars. And I am dumb to tell the lover's tomb how at my sheet goes the same crooked worm. Human life itself is like a tangled garden. We mingle our roots with other roots. We drop seeds and watch them disappear. We blossom crazily in the sun, and we wither in winter. Let's walk in the human garden for a short while. Let's pick some metaphors at random and make a small bouquet and carry them away with us. Plant growth is a common metaphor for human maturation. The parts of a plant give us common words to describe human potential and growth, a hint or a hope that humans may still belong to nature. Particular phases in a plant's life cycle represent qualities we find or project onto humans. We're so used to these metaphors, we find them banal. Rarely do we encounter a metaphor like the green fuse that blasts the roots of trees. So let's look at roots and seeds and see how that metaphor plays out in human life. A seed contains all the information a plant needs to grow, blossom, and bear fruit. The first thing a seed does is spread roots, looking for nourishment. Humans search out roots for nourishment, for growth, for stability. We used to provide seeds and roots to our children to enable them to grow. Long ago, the Potawatomi natives had a culture in which nourishment was provided and children began to feel their roots. Some would say a primitive culture without machines or any of the technology of modern society. The Potawatomi were considered undeveloped by those who came to conquer them. But look at the roots their adults gave their children to grow on. In contrast, look at the nourishment our modern culture offers our children. As they search for their roots, search to unfold themselves from their childhood seed, this is what they have to grow on. So our children have had to create their own roots, find their own nourishment. And as they do, little by little they become different organisms, different species. They have less and less in common with adults. The adults, meanwhile, sure of their ideas, content in their success, and bewildered by what they see, have no idea that their own roots have been destroyed in the process, that the green fuse has blasted the roots of their tree. Why has this happened? Why is humanity less and less able to nourish the seeds that it plants? Partial answers are everywhere. Consumerism, technology, multiculturalism, ageism, the eternally changing present, the constantly shifting contexts in which we live, all these conspire to distance adults from their children, to fragment culture into mini-cultures, to make continuity impossible. It feels like we've lost our past and suffer our present, and have become orphans to the future. It feels like we've been expelled from the garden. The garden is a place of wholeness. Growth and decay, life and death coexist. The most famous garden in Judeo-Christian mythology is the Garden of Eden, a place of peace and innocence. In this childlike, womb-like, dreamlike state, all needs were met. Only one act could rupture this trance. One may not eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Eating from this tree will bring expulsion from the garden and a life ending in death. Symbolically, when Eve and Adam ate of the fruit of knowledge, there was the birth of self-reflective consciousness. There was the beginning of individual personality formation. With the birth of a knowing ego, there was an automatic expulsion from the garden of unconscious wholeness out into the world of conscious individuality. We all remember the feeling of the wholeness of the womb, of infancy. We can't return to it by going backwards. Our journey is to strive to regain our wholeness consciously and with intention. Conscious wholeness can be made manifest in the world and shared with others. Our private gardens reflect our desire for wholeness, our image of organic health, the merger of the unconscious, the conscious, and the mysterious green fuse. Look at these gardens and notice your feelings. Be aware of how the gardens affect your unconscious, your emotions, your imagination. Note which gardens you might like to visit, or perhaps like to stay in. An overwhelming social expression of garden wholeness was the flower power movement of the 1960s. Cultural radicalism, hippies, the Summer of Love in San Francisco in 1967, the Woodstock Festival in 1969, the breakdown of conventional sexual morality and the rise of the sexual revolution, women's liberation, gay liberation, civil rights, rock and roll, blues, and folk music. As ridiculous as some of its emblems may seem to us today, there was no aspect of human life untouched by it. Then, gradually, the hippies disappeared, and we entered the Big Chill. The wet dawn inks are doing their blue dissolve. On their blotter of fog, the trees seem a botanical drawing, memories growing, ring on ring. O mother of leaves and sweetness, who are these pietas? The shadows of ringdoves chanting, but chasing nothing. Sylvia Plath. Over the past few decades, much has happened to cool the growth of the human spirit on this planet. A winter has set in, wrapping us in a snow blanket of complacency, cooling the sap that runs in our veins, causing us to cover ourselves with a compost of dead leaves and warm memories. Some of us have been out walking in the snow, feeling the brisk air, glimpsing the half-covered eyes of passers-by. Others of us have nestled more or less comfortably in pots, warmed by a little light in a little space, talking in quiet whispers with other pots, forgetting for a moment the feel of the soil, the rain, the sun. Still others of us have been trying to urge the season to end, chanting incantations to the sun that a spring might unfold. E. Cummings. Anyone lived in a pretty how town with upso floating many bells down, spring, summer, autumn, winter. He sang his didn't, he danced his did. Women and men, both little and small, cared for anyone not at all. They sowed their isn't, they reaped their same. Sun, moon, stars, rain, Children guessed, but only a few, and down they forgot as up they grew, autumn, winter, spring, summer, that no one loved him more by more. When by now and tree by leaf, she laughed his joy, she cried his grief, bird by snow and stir by still, anyone's any was all to her. Someone's married their everyone's, laughed their cryings and did their dance, sleep, wake, hope, and then they said their nevers, they slept their dream. The ewes crowd to the mangers, their bellies widen, sag, their udders tighten. Soon the little voices cry in morning cold. Soon now the garden must be worked, laid off in rows, the seed of life to come, brought down into the dark to rest. Wendell Berry. Seeds. Germination, the unfolding of potency from latency, of realization from potential, of transformation. Speaking botanically, germination is resurrection. The agent of germination is the seed. Because of its latent potency, the seed has been taken as a symbol of the human potential for growth and transformation. What is a seed is seminal. Seminars, seminaries, insemination. The ancient Greek mystery schools, the Orphic, Dionysian, and Eleusinian, initiated their students through a descent underground into darkness, where transformation could occur. For them, the seed was the symbol of human metempsychosis. The worship of the seed can be found in almost all ancient religions. The seed was the symbol of the life-giving force, the divine effluence, the mysterious elemental sustainers of mankind. In Egyptian mythology, from which the Greek mysteries derived, the seed was the symbol of the capacity of humans to rise to a higher consciousness. The Hebrew Kabbalah saw the seed as the image of the Shekinah, the sparks showered by God, the source of divine consciousness in mankind. The ancient mysteries were the dramatic and mythopoetic reenactment of the journey of the seed. It is born in the light, falls to earth, descends underground and becomes dormant, eventually sprouting into new life in the upper world. This is the core story of the Christian mythos, in which a sacred individual defeats the forces of death and darkness and returns revitalized to the world as a channel to eternity. There were murmuring from the jungle of vomit, with the empty women, with hot-waxed children, with fermented trees, and tireless waiters who serve platters of salt beneath harps of saliva. There's no other way, my son, vomit. There's no other way. It's not the vomit of hussars on the breasts of their whores, nor the vomit of cats that inadvertently swallowed frogs, but the dead, who scratch with clay hands on flint gates, where clouds and deserts decay. Federico Garcia Lorca. Landscape of a Vomiting Multitude. The matted floor of a tropical rainforest is an environment of great diversity. It approaches that of brain tissue in its complexity. Within the network of interconnected roots, complex chemical signals are constantly being transmitted and received. Co-adaptive evolution and symbiotic relationships regulate the entire system. It may be that cooperative strategies are an evolutionary principle. Mycorrhizal fungi live in symbiosis on plant roots and gently balance and buffer the mineral-laden water that's moving through them to the roots of their host. It supplies the roots with minerals, and the roots supply them with carbohydrates. Elements of decay become elements of life, as the green fuse animates the jungle. Botanists and neural network researchers are studying the complex systems which evolve naturally among plants and animals, systems which are symbiotic, which, through cooperation, advance life in a manner that isolated individuals cannot achieve. Humanity has, for thousands of years, remained largely individualistic, with only highly specialized and restricted forms of cooperation, such as commerce, war, and sports, or enforced cooperatism, such as communism. But, as with individual trees in the rainforest, humans may be able to cooperate more than they think. They may simply lack the idea of who to do it with, the opportunity to do it, and the technology to perceive it. This is now changing. In the 1950s, scientists were examining the spontaneous order in the brain, arising out of decentralized networks of simple neurons. Neural networks can bounce back and forth until they activate themselves at some node, and the network settles on a final state. Neural networking has become a way of mapping human decisions. Until recently, there was no large-scale way to detect human choice patterns. The internet changed all this. People's search requests, click patterns, download choices are being anonymously mapped, giving us a global picture not only of what people do, but how their choices relate to other people's choices. This invasion of privacy may lead to a reformulation of individuality, even a renourishment of the concept of self, bringing us minerals as we shed carbohydrates. Already, there are some questionable benefits. Yahoo will ask you to rate a few movies, then generate a list of movies you will probably also like. Yahoo is connecting your choices with a set of features extracted from thousands of movies. Yahoo knows your taste better than your spouse does. Your preferences for music can be mapped based only on the psychoacoustical sound elements contained in the clips, tone, rhythm, and so on. The interactive nature of the internet, the vast database of choices, provides for the first time a tool for humans to see how they interact. More importantly, just as fungi develop among the roots of rainforest trees, thousands of germinal spores are moving into the net forest. Most will die, but some will begin to form symbiotic relationships with net users. Do you like Google? Do you use wikis? Do you use blogs? The internet is the first human experiment in global cooperativism, and it's creating new archetypes of human interaction. Many are beginning to value sharing, open source systems, and interactive joint projects like Wikipedia. But there are many different kinds of creature in the net forest. As Eve found out, there are snakes. There are spammers, porn merchants, corporate spies, and of course, ads everywhere. The net forest has a long way to go before a balanced ecosystem emerges. As in any rainforest, our advice is to proceed with caution and wear thick socks. Finally, we come to topiary, the true inversion of the botanical metaphor. Up to now, we've been exploring metaphors taken from the rose, the roots, the jungle, the seed, and applying them to us as humans. Only in topiary can we give back and impose our metaphors directly on them. In topiary, we find many mysteries of human existence expressed visually with pruning shears. In most forms of topiary, the human mystery is perhaps not obvious. But there is one form of topiary designed to lead us to the center of our existence. In Greek mythology, the labyrinth was an elaborate maze-like structure designed by Daedalus for King Minos of Crete to hold the Minotaur, a creature that was half man and half bull. Assisted by the thread of Ariadne, the Athenian hero Theseus eventually killed the Minotaur. Labyrinths were presided over by the goddess of honey. We can't unravel the hidden story of Theseus and the Minotaur here. It involves a complex path to the monster in the center, guided by the thread of fate, watched over by the goddess of honey, a hidden story of courage and sweet reward. The term labyrinth is often used interchangeably with maze. But a maze has a complex branching passage with choices of path and direction, while a labyrinth has an unambiguous through route to the center and back and is not designed to be confusing to navigate. Both the maze and the labyrinth have been reproduced in topiary for centuries. The topiary maze is the metaphor for our confusion, our ability to get lost and to rediscover ourselves. With a labyrinth, there is only one choice to be made. The choice is to enter or not. The choice is whether or not to walk a spiritual path, a path to the core of our existence, half human, half animal. Mazes and labyrinths have appeared in fiction. The Argentine writer Jorge Luis Borges wrote a story called The Garden of Forking Paths. In this story, a German spy wants to tell his chief about a British artillery location so the Germans can destroy it. He comes up with a plan to go to a Dr. Stephen Albert's house and shoot him. By shooting Stephen Albert, he relays the message to his chief in Berlin that Albert is the city where the British artillery is located. But some confusing circumstances arise along the spy's journey to Dr. Stephen Albert's house. During his journey, he begins to remember his grandfather's lost labyrinth. As a result of thinking about the maze, he finds himself trapped in a garden maze at Dr. Albert's house. For Borges, the maze represents the numerous paths that one can travel and all of the possible outcomes from these paths. The Glass Bead Game is the last work of the German author Hermann Hesse. It centers around a monastic order of intellectuals in the fictional province of Castalia. At the center of this society lies the Glass Bead Game. The precise rules of the game are never given and are not easy to imagine. Essentially, the game is an abstract synthesis of all arts and scholarship. It proceeds by players making deep connections between seemingly unrelated topics. For example, a Bach concerto could be related to a mathematical formula. An audience's appreciation of a good glass bead game is something like appreciating subtle connections in music or in art. The writings of Borges and Hesse directly spawn many attempts to capture the maze-like interrelations among ideas, words, and people. One approach is called organic poetry. Organic poetry is a social experiment designed to produce collaborative poetry, using a seed to generate forking chains of words. It's an exercise in creating a rhizome-like network of words which can be read meaningfully in multiple, nonlinear ways. A rhizome is an underground plant stem that puts out roots at random intervals. The rhizome starts from a seed, a beginning place, a few words. It branches in two, and players add new words to each branch, and again their words branch in two. A swarming botanical garden of branching words develops, parts of which express accidental or perhaps emergent meaning. To create organic poetry is to reveal the shape of the mental and emotional garden that invisibly connects us in an hour, in an evening, in a day. It's a way to remember that, consciously or unconsciously, we belong to each other, that we create a space for each other to be in, to grow in, and to share. Now we've walked the tangled garden, and we've collected our symbolic bouquet. Perhaps now we can better sense in the innocence of petals, in the darkness of roots, in the stillness of seeds, the mysterious organic force that drives the flower, blasts the roots of trees, and drives our red blood.